Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a close look at some really compelling headlines coming out of India for June 24th, 2025.
Hmm.
This isn't just, a random mix. It's a carefully put together snapshot of just one day. But these stories, well, they have global ripples and pretty profound local impacts too, affecting everyone from international travelers to political leaders right down to everyday citizens.
Absolutely. What's really striking, I think, is the sheer breadth of stories that hit the wires just on this one day. I mean, we're talking everything from, high-stakes geopolitical tensions, major economic moves on the world stage,
Yeah.
all the way to critical domestic political shifts that are really shaping India's future, plus big health initiatives, even the drama playing out on the cricket field. Our mission today really is to get beyond just the headlines, give you the context, the why behind it all, help you truly understand what's going on underneath.
Yeah, think of this as your shortcut to being genuinely well-informed, helping you spot those surprising facts, maybe connect some dots that might otherwise get lost in the daily news churn, and hopefully gain a stronger grasp of the world around you. So, ready to dive in.
Global geopolitical ripples and India's crossroads.
Okay, let's kick off with a headline that sent immediate shockwaves across the travel industry. It directly impacts international connections, causing huge disruption for potentially thousands of people. We're talking about Air India's significant flight suspensions. And this is way more than just delayed trips, isn't it? It's a stark sign of rising global tensions.
That's exactly right. Air India took the, well, pretty drastic step of suspending all its flights to and from the Middle East, Europe, and the East Coast of North America. This isn't a minor adjustment. It hits major international hubs. We're talking Dubai, DXB, London Heathrow, New York JFK. Think about it. Even flights already in the air heading to North America, they were rerouted or told to turn back. Newark, Toronto, affected too. The airline's been very clear. Passenger and crew safety is the absolute priority. That's why they made these immediate, widespread changes. You only do this with a severe, imminent kind of threat.
Right. And it's not just Air India, is it? Other big carriers are caught up too.
No, definitely not an isolated thing. Etihad Airways, Turkish Airlines, they're also seeing major disruptions, cancellations to Gulf cities like Dubai, Abu Dhabi. They're all scrambling, basically advising passengers to keep checking, stay informed. It creates this sort of cascade effect across the whole global aviation network.
So what's the trigger here? What's driving this?
Well, if we connect it to the bigger picture, these suspensions stem directly from the escalating tensions in the Israel-Iran conflict. This decision came right after a major escalation. Iran launched a missile strike on the U.S.-operated Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. And what's really crucial for you, the listener, to grasp is that this Iranian strike, it was itself a direct response, a response to U.S. airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities just 2 days before on June 22nd. So this whole situation just highlights the extreme fragility, of international flights during these kinds of crises. Airlines are constantly talking to security advisors. Assessments are changing almost hour by hour. That leads to these sweeping operational shifts. It's dynamic, high stakes. Safety has to adapt instantly.
Okay, but here's where the story takes a really unexpected turn. While Air India and others are taking these very real, tangible safety steps, focusing on risk, we also have former U.S. President Donald Trump commenting on that exact missile attack on the U.S. base in Qatar. And his take is, well, surprisingly different, almost optimistic. This contrast is really telling.
It is quite something. Yeah, on his platform, Truth Social, Trump really downplayed Iran's missile attack. He called it a very weak response. His claim was that the U.S. actually knew about it in advance, had intelligence, which, according to him, allowed them to intercept 13 out of 14 missiles, ensuring no American or Qatari casualties. He even suggested one missile was allowed to fly freely because, well, he assessed it posed no threat.
That's a remarkable claim, isn't it?
Yeah.
For military strike on a U.S. base, he actually said he was satisfied no lives were lost, and maybe even more surprisingly, publicly thanked Iran for the early warning. He suggested that warning was exactly why a bigger escalation was avoided. It almost sounds less like an attack and more like a managed exchange.
Precisely. Yeah, a managed exchange is a good way to put it. He then shifted to calling for an immediate end to hostilities, urged both Iran and Israel to pursue peace, saying they've gotten it all out of their system, which kind of implies this contained, almost symbolic hit was necessary, maybe even a healthy release of tension. And interestingly, reports from U.S. media, like the New York Times, and even Iranian officials seem to sort of back this up, suggesting Iran had told Qatar beforehand to minimize risk, allowing Iran to respond, but also giving room for de-escalation. It suggests a real high-stakes game of strategic signaling.
So, almost like a choreographed response. Designed not to escalate, but let everyone save face without starting a bigger war. And the New York Post added that Qatar strategically allowed itself to be targeted to save face. Trump apparently praised the Qatari emir for that too, crediting him with helping regional peace. And he finished with this big statement: "Congratulations, world, it's time for peace."
It's definitely a very particular way to frame what most would see as a hostile military act.
Yeah.
The implication is clear, though. This was maybe a carefully handled diplomatic move, not really a surprise attack, letting everyone pull back from the brink.
So you have this really stark contrast. On one hand, airlines grounding flights due to immediate safety fears, massive disruption. On the other, a political leader framing that same incident as controlled, almost positive, a step towards peace. What does this tell us, really, about how these big geopolitical events are seen and managed today in this interconnected but, fractured world? Are we actually seeing de-escalation or just a narrative designed to manage the fallout, whatever the reality on the ground? It makes you wonder.
Okay, but the global chessboard, well, it has other big moves happening too, and one directly affects India's economy, its strategic partnerships, could really redefine its global standing for years. We're talking about a legislative push happening in the United States. That's right. India is facing potential economic heat from the U.S. because of this proposed Sanctioning Russia Act of 2025. And this isn't just some minor bill. It was introduced by Senator Lindsey Graham, sure, but it has 84 co-sponsors in the Senate. That signals serious bipartisan support, real legislative momentum. It makes it a tangible threat, not just talk. And what makes it really relevant for us is it explicitly targets not just Russia, but nations maintaining strong economic ties, specifically naming India and China.
And the way they plan to apply pressure is pretty direct,
Yeah.
severe, actually.
Yeah, it's blunt. The bill proposes steep tariffs on exports to the U.S. if these countries keep buying Russian oil, gas, uranium, petroleum products. It's not a subtle hint. It's a clear attempt to put a major economic squeeze on countries still doing business with Russia. Could really hit their trade balance with the U.S.
And India's current position makes this really tricky, doesn't it?
Hugely tricky. As of May 2025, India is the world's second largest buyer of Russian fossil fuels. The numbers are massive. An estimated $4.2 billion spent on these imports. Crude oil alone is like 72% of that total. It just shows how much India needs energy and how reliant it's become on those discounted Russian supplies. Fundamentally, this bill is part of the wider U.S. strategy: pressure Russia to end the Ukraine war by hitting its economy and hitting its partners' economies too.
It puts India in a really tough strategic spot. I mean, the bill does mention a possible 180-day waiver. The president could exempt a country if it's in U.S. national security interests, but the overall intent is crystal clear. And Senator Graham, he's been very vocal, hasn't he, criticizing India before for supporting Russia, warning India and China not to help Putin's war effort. So this isn't new, but now it's becoming actual proposed law.
Which raises the critical dilemma for India. What's the balancing act here? It's incredibly delicate. On one side, cutting off Russian oil immediately could trigger global energy price spikes. That would seriously hurt India's own economy, drive inflation, maybe slow growth. But on the other side, India's also worried about potential supply disruptions from West Asia, with all the tensions there. So secure, diverse energy sources are vital. Prashant Vashisht from ICRA, the credit rating agency, he specifically highlighted this, said constraining oil supplies further could be a severe challenge for India's energy security. It's not just about picking sides, it's about protecting its own fundamental economic health.
So what's the bottom line here for India and for you, the listener, watching these global power plays? If this act passes, it could fundamentally change India-U.S. trade, force India into some very tough choices, and it would definitely strain that long-standing strategic relationship with Russia. It's this complex web, isn't it? Alliances, economic needs, strategic goals. And for you, it's crucial to see how these big global political moves translate into real economic pressure points, affecting everything from fuel prices to international relations. It really shows the tightrope India is walking on the world stage right now. And speaking of India's international relations, the country is also navigating some pretty sharp exchanges with global bodies, specifically the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the OIC, another example of how these global forums can become stages for, well, quite heated arguments.
Absolutely. India issued a really strong condemnation of the OIC on Monday. They called the OIC's remarks unwarranted and factually incorrect regarding India's internal affairs. These comments came out of the OIC's recent ministerial meeting in Turkey. And India's Ministry of External Affairs, the MEA, they didn't mince words. They rejected the statements flat out. and specifically said they were influenced by Pakistan, which India consistently accuses of using terrorism as a tool of statecraft. Not a new charge, but stated very forcefully again here.
Okay, so what exactly did the OIC say that got such a strong reaction from Delhi?
Well, the OIC criticized India on a few fronts. A key one was the alleged social marginalization of Indian Muslims, always a very sensitive issue India sees as internal. The OIC also stressed upholding bilateral agreements between India and Pakistan, specifically mentioning the Indus Waters Treaty, that crucial, often contentious water-sharing deal. And they urged broad dialogue to resolve all outstanding issues between the two countries, which India often sees as trying to internationalize bilateral matters.
And India's response, through the MEA. Did they engage with the substance, or was it more about the OIC's right to comment?
India's rebuttal was definitely firm and primarily focused on the OIC's perceived lack of neutrality. It was more procedural, really. The MEA basically told off the OIC for, as they put it, being misused by Pakistan for narrow political aims. India specifically hammered the point that the OIC failed, yet again, to recognize the real, documented threat of terrorism coming from Pakistan. They pointed directly to the recent Pahalgam attack in Jammu and Kashmir as clear evidence, saying the OIC was ignoring facts while criticizing India. It really signals India's deep frustration with what it sees as the OIC's inherent bias, often driven by Pakistan's agenda within the organization.
It really does show how these international platforms can become battlegrounds for bilateral fights, doesn't it? Reflecting old grievances more than objective reality sometimes. India's firm stance, as you said, is consistent, viewing these comments as biased, meddling in internal affairs, crossing a sovereign line. Does that risk pushing away maybe more neutral members within the OIC, or is it just a necessary stand for national sovereignty?
India's position is very clear on this. They see it as interference, driven by an agenda. They consistently argue external bodies shouldn't comment on internal matters or regional issues unless those comments are demonstrably objective, not driven by one country's politics. It's always a delicate balance, isn't it? Maintaining international ties while fiercely guarding what you consider your sovereign space.
And for you, the listener, this gives a crucial insight into how global diplomacy works, often behind closed doors. And that delicate balance countries like India have to strike between national sovereignty and facing international scrutiny, especially when rivals are involved. Using these multilateral stages as a constant push and pull on the world stage really affects how nations deal with each other. Okay, from high-level diplomacy, let's pivot to something that affects individuals very directly, especially anyone hoping to study or work overseas. The U.S. Embassy in India has announced a new policy for visa applicants, and it involves something pretty personal, your social media.
Yeah, this is a significant change with pretty big implications. The U.S. Embassy in India now requires applicants for FMNJ visas. That's students, vocational trainees, exchange visitors to make their social media profiles publicly visible. It's a big step, designed to strengthen the screening process for these non-immigrant applicants, allows consular officials more access to, verify identity, assess eligibility under U.S. law. It's basically moving towards more transparency, but arguably at the cost of some digital privacy.
And this builds on an older policy from 2019, right, where applicants had to disclose their social media handles.
It does, yeah. But this latest change takes it a crucial step further by demanding public visibility. Though, interestingly, the announcement doesn't actually say for how long these profiles need to stay public. Leaves a bit of ambiguity there for people applying.
And this seems part of a broader trend in U.S. immigration, doesn't it? More scrutiny.
Undeniably. It reflects that wider trend towards heightened scrutiny, something that really ramped up under the previous Trump administration, but it's continued. It's part of a bigger security-first approach. And notably, Secretary of State Marco Rubio was quite explicit. He said applicants with social media posts about the Israel-Gaza conflict could face more vetting, maybe even rejection. That directly links current global events to individual visa decisions. Shows how wide the net can be cast.
And it's not happening in isolation either.
No, exactly. In parallel, the U.S. also brought in a new travel ban affecting 12 nations, plus partial visa restrictions on 7 others. These countries, mostly in the Middle East and Africa, are labeled high risk. Terrorism concerns, security weaknesses. It really underlines this pervasive national security-first mindset and immigration policy. Focus on assessing risk before entry.
So this brings up that fundamental question, doesn't it? How do governments balance national security against individual privacy, especially online?
It's the core tension. This new social media rule clearly signals the U.S. government wants more transparency to mitigate perceived security risks in visa issuing, especially from regions they see as sensitive, or for individuals whose online activity might raise flags. It's a very clear national security first stance, puts the burden of transparency firmly on the applicant. And for individuals, well, it means understanding that what you post online, even years ago, could now directly affect your ability to travel, study, or work in the U.S.
So for you, the listener, if you're planning on studying, doing vocational training, or an exchange program in the U.S., those FMJ visas, these policy changes are critical to know about. They really highlight this evolving landscape of international travel, the growing importance of your digital footprint, and how your online life can impact your real-world plans. It's a strong reminder our digital lives and international mobility are increasingly linked. It's not just about image anymore, it's about eligibility.
Domestic political shifts in India.
Okay, let's bring it closer to home now. India's domestic political scene is seeing some, well, seismic shifts, particularly in states like Bihar. It's become a real epicenter for this growing focus on caste and political discussions, and this isn't just local politics, it's potentially reshaping political strategy right across the country.
Absolutely. There was recent caste census in Bihar, and it revealed something truly remarkable, politically potent. A staggering 84% of Bihar's population belongs to backward and marginalized communities. 84%. This sheer demographic weight has dramatically reshaped the electoral battlefield there. It makes caste-based representation and social justice not just important issues, but absolutely central. Parties just cannot ignore it anymore. This isn't just data, it's a demographic game changer, forces everyone to rethink their old strategies.
And it's fascinating how quickly this data forced a shift in political thinking, right across the board.
It really is. The caste census, which the ruling BJP initially resisted, well, now they've cautiously embraced it. They recognize its political weight, they have to adapt. The ruling NDA coalition, for example, they're actively recalibrating how they reach out to these newly quantified groups, acknowledging their numbers.
And the opposition.
The NDA blocked the opposition parties. They're using this data forcefully, arguing for expanded quotas, deeper structural reforms for more equity, more representation. So now both sides are intensely trying to appeal to these backward groups. The focus is shifting squarely to promises of equitable governance, more representation in jobs, in education. It's a big pivot away from those purely development-focused narratives we often see dominate Indian elections. It means for voters, the upcoming 2025 polls, they're not just about roads and bridges anymore. They're profoundly about identity, social justice, systemic change.
It really underscores how raw demographic data can just, boom, force a paradigm shift in politics. A real masterclass in how election strategies have to adapt to reality on the ground, moving the conversation from, standard development promises to this potent, identity-driven demand for systemic change. And it's not abstract, is it? It's about recognition, inclusion, correcting decades of underrepresentation felt by these communities.
And the ripples go far beyond Bihar. The outcome there is now seen as a crucial litmus test. It could influence similar moves, policy debates in other big electorally vital states like Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh, where caste dynamics are also incredibly powerful. Political heavyweights like Nitish Kumar, who started this census, and rising figures like Tejashi Yadav, they're expected to play key roles in this new landscape, both meticulously aligning their strategies to this newly quantified social reality. It's going to reshape the political playbook for years.
Yeah, this census has truly transformed Bihar's election narrative. It's now a high-stakes contest of numbers, identity, political will. It's not just another state election. It's shaping up to be one of the most consequential, closely watched state elections in recent memory. A fascinating look at how deep demographic truths drive huge political shifts, forcing parties to rethink their core message. And speaking of identity and political maneuvering, there was a recent by-election in West Bengal. It offers another really intriguing look at how parties fight for support, even when they, lose the election. It's a fascinating case study in political messaging.
Yes, despite losing the Kaliganj Assembly by poll in West Bengal, the BJP didn't frame it as a total loss. Instead, they boldly claimed a significant ideological gain. They asserted they got their highest ever share of Hindu votes in that constituency, which lets them spin an electoral defeat into a narrative of growing ideological strength. That's a key part of their long-term plan in the state.
And Amit Malviya, the BJP's co-in-charge for West Bengal, he was very vocal about this, very strategic.
Extremely. He stated that growing Hindutva consciousness, that political ideology focused on Hindu identity and cultural nationalism, plus public anger over some recent riots in Murshidabad, fueled this increased support from Hindu voters. And he didn't stop there. In a pretty pointed post on X, he directly challenged the chief minister, Mamata Banerjee. She'd said the win showed support from all religions and castes. Malviya argued against that, said the ruling Trinamool Congress is propped up by what he controversially termed a captive vote bank. Muslims, alleged illegal Bangladeshi infiltrators, radical groups. He claimed the Hindu electorate, just like they once ditched the left front, is now actively turning away from Banerjee. It's a clear attempt to polarize voters along religious lines.
And he used specific numbers to back this up, didn't he, to paint a picture of progress?
He did. He laid out statistics for Kaliganj. Hindus are about 43% of voters there, Muslims the rest. He claimed the BJP's Hindu vote share climbed steadily, 70% in 2021, up to 72% in the 2024 general election, then over 74% in this recent by-poll, their highest ever, he says. Malviya didn't just see it as a by-election. He provocatively called the upcoming state assembly election a full-blown revolution.
So it raises that interesting question. Can a party really claim ideological victory even when they lose the vote count?
It's a classic political strategy, isn't it? The BJP's narrative here clearly frames its growing appeal among Hindu voters as broader ideological momentum, regardless of the seat outcome. Yes, the Trinamool Congress kept the Kaliganj seat, but the BJP's heavy focus on identity politics, their effort to consolidate Hindu votes, it signals a very deliberate strategic pivot. They're trying to redefine the political landscape in West Bengal, setting the stage for next year's crucial state elections, signaling the battle will be as much about identity as governance.
So for you, the listener, this gives a unique window into how parties craft narratives, how they use specific data points, even after a loss, to build long-term advantage. It's a classic example of reframing defeat to fuel a bigger campaign, portraying the next election not just as a contest, but as this full-blown revolution driven by ideology and shifting vote banks. A fascinating, maybe sometimes unsettling, look at the art of political spin and long-term strategy in Indian state politics. Okay, from broad election strategies and identity politics, let's shift again to some intense state-level rivalries. And in Andhra Pradesh, we're seeing a new wave of political tension, unfortunately marked by serious accusations and a tragic incident.
Indeed. The former Chief Minister, Y.S. Jagan Mohan Reddy, has leveled some strong accusations against the current CM, Chandrababu Naidu, claiming Naidu is orchestrating political vendetta, undermining democratic standards in the state. And this isn't just, standard political attacks. It's tied to a very specific, very controversial incident that's really grabbed headlines.
Right, this follows that deeply unfortunate situation where a 55-year-old man was allegedly run over by a vehicle in Reddy's convoy. During a visit to Pulnadu district on June 18th, a pretty distressing video apparently showing the incident, supposedly involving Reddy's car, went viral, fueled a lot of public debate, intense political scrutiny, added this tragic human element to the whole thing.
But Reddy's party, the YSRCP, they quickly pushed back, claimed the video was doctored, and accused the ruling TDT party of politicizing what they call a tragic accident. So immediately, a human tragedy becomes a political football, both sides using it to attack the other.
And Reddy's accusations went further than just the video, didn't they?
They did. He also criticized the government for imposing what he called unfair restrictions on his recent tour. He's trying to visit Rentapala in Satnapalli constituency, wanted to meet party workers, show support for local farmers, standard political outreach, especially for an opposition leader. In a detailed statement on X, he questioned why opposition leaders are being stopped from doing this, pointedly noted that Naidu and his ally Pawan Kalyan didn't face these kinds of hurdles when YSRCP was in power, suggesting a double standard, an abuse of power.
He even linked it to his security detail.
Yeah, he went further, suggesting that if his Z-plus security, it's the highest level in India, armed commandos, multiple vehicles, the works hadn't been withdrawn, the fatal accident might have been avoided altogether. That specific claim brings in this element of alleged government responsibility, maybe negligence, into the story, puts the onus on the current administration for the outcome. Which brings up that crucial point again, how a tragic incident becomes a battleground for political narratives. Reddy is framing the TDP's actions not just as politics, but as eroding democratic norms, basic human decency. He's emphasizing his right to engage with people, an act he says is now being stifled by state power.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, and for Andhra Pradesh as this plays out? Well, Reddy's comments signal a definite sharpening of political tensions there. They put a spotlight on serious concerns about security for public figures, freedom of movement for the opposition, and just fair political competition overall. It's a raw, personal reminder of the high stakes, the intense rivalries in state politics in India, where every incident, however tragic, could be weaponized politically, and where that line between governance and vendetta can seem very blurry.
Business innovation and public health in India.
All right, let's shift gears completely now. Moving away from politics to a huge development in health and business, something completely different, but potentially just as impactful for India. A major pharmaceutical breakthrough that could genuinely change lives and reshape public health strategy.
This is definitely a big one for India. The Danish pharma giant Novo Nordisk is targeting, get this, $1 billion, that's about 8,600 crore in sales in India, within just the next 5 to 7 years. That's incredibly ambitious. And it's all driven by the upcoming launch of their blockbuster weight loss drug, Wegovy, based on semaglutide. And this isn't just wishful thinking. They have a serious go-to-market plan for pan-India reach. Shows a real calculated commitment to this huge market.
And India is, unfortunately, a massive market for this kind of drug, isn't it? Facing a huge obesity challenge.
It really is. India currently has the third largest obese population in the world, only behind the US and China. The numbers are quite stark, paint a grim picture, really. An estimated 254 million people with general obesity. And even higher, 351 million with abdominal obesity. It just highlights the immense scale of the public health crisis the country is dealing with. Makes an effective, accessible drug like Wegovy potentially life-changing for millions.
And this drug, Wegovy, it's expected to really shake things up in the Indian pharma market.
Oh, definitely. It's poised to challenge Keytruda, which is currently India's top prescription drug brand, bringing in over 1,600 crore a year. And Novo Nordisk isn't starting from scratch. They already dominate the Indian insulin market, got like a 62% share. So they're really leveraging that existing presence, their distribution network, their understanding of the market to roll out Wegovy.
And they're looking beyond just weight loss too, right?
Exactly. They're heavily promoting Wegovy's additional benefits. Clinical trials are showing positive effects on heart, liver, kidney health that could massively expand its reach beyond just obesity. Position it as more of a broad metabolic health solution, tackling related conditions. Plus, it'll come in those convenient FlexTouch pen devices, easy self-administration, 5 different doses. That's key for people sticking with chronic treatments, especially these GLP-1 agonists like semaglutide that mimic hormones to control appetite and blood sugar. And Novo Nordisk is actively saying Wegovy is superior to its main rival, Mounjaro, that's tirzepatide from Eli Lilly. Citing data showing 20% weight loss, 20% reduction in cardiovascular risks, gives them a strong competitive story. Plus, it's in trials for fatty liver, chronic kidney disease, further broadening its potential market.
So this raises the big question. How will this new drug really impact public health and the pharma market in India? Not just sales, but access, affordability, long-term disease management for so many people.
That is the crucial challenge. There's a big patent expiry looming for semaglutide March 2026. That will absolutely invite strong competition from Indian generic drug makers who are known for being fast and cost-effective. So Novo Nordisk needs to act fast, build market dominance before that happens. They've already started legal action against alleged patent infringers, shows how aggressive they'll be to protect their turf. Pricing will also be absolutely critical. Affordability is often a huge barrier for new, expensive drugs in India with its diverse economy. And, the long-term societal impact of a widely available weight loss drug beyond just health, things like shifts in the food industry, public views on obesity, that'll be fascinating to watch too.
Now, there have been some safety concerns mentioned, like vision loss.
Yes, those have been reported. But Novo Nordisk maintains the overall benefit-risk profile for semaglutide is favorable. They point to extensive data over 52,000 patients, lots of post-marketing surveillance, suggesting they're confident in its safety for wide use. So for you, the listener, this is definitely a significant development to keep an eye on, especially given the sheer scale of India's obesity problem and the potential for a whole new approach to chronic disease management this drug could bring. It's a health story with massive economic and social implications, could impact hundreds of millions of lives.
The sporting arena, a thrilling finish.
All right, finally, let's wrap things up with a headline that has sports fans absolutely on the edge of their seats, combines national pride with some nail-biting drama. We're pivoting to the world of cricket, where a test match has taken a truly dramatic, unexpected turn.
Oh, this is classic test match stuff, the kind that keeps you glued to the screen right till the very end. Day 4 of the first test between England and India at Headingley, England suddenly reignited hopes of a dramatic win. Thanks to a late and, frankly, pretty shocking Indian batting collapse, it was just a complete sudden momentum swing. Brought life back into what looked like a foregone conclusion.
It really was a huge shift. India had been looking so strong, almost commanding. Brilliant centuries from both KL Rahul and Rishabh Pant anchoring the innings. They seemed to be cruising, building this massive lead, setting a target that looked unbeatable. But then England's Josh Tongue just ripped through them. An incredible spell of bowling. Took 3 crucial wickets in just 4 balls. It was a burst of brilliance that changed the game in an instant.
Absolutely did. India ended up all out for 364 in their second innings, which set England a target of 371 runs to win on the final day. And the collapse itself was pretty stark. Reminded you of some past Indian batting wobbles. Just like their first innings, the tail just crumbled. Lost their last 6 wickets for only 31 runs. Tongue, who'd already got a couple of wickets earlier, he really led the charge with pace and accuracy. Well supported by Shoaib Bashir and Brighton Cars, who jumped on the pressure, the momentum shift.
And those key wickets fell so fast, didn't they? Almost a blur.
Yeah, Pant, who'd played so well with his usual flair, he felt a crawly off Bashir. And then KL Rahul, the anchor, bowled by Cars. That really triggered the big collapse. It just highlights India's ongoing lower-order vulnerability, still a concern, even with strong top-order shows. Their inability to really hammer home the advantage after 2 big centuries, it just handed England a lifeline they desperately needed. Almost gift-wrapped it, didn't they? You could almost hear the sighs of relief from the England balcony.
You really could. So what's the situation now? That's a big target, 371.
It certainly is. What's fascinating now is the huge psychological momentum shift. Yes, 371 is steep. It would be England's second highest successful test run chase ever against India, and the second highest ever at Headingley, only behind that legendary Ben Stokes innings in 2019 against Australia, a chase everyone remembers. But despite that huge historical challenge, England clearly sees a glimmer of hope now. The pitch is offering variable bounce, helping the quick bowlers, makes every ball an event, every over potentially decisive. It's just classic test match setup where anything can happen on the final day. Turns long odds into real, nail-biting possibilities.
So what does this mean for the fans? For the series going into this final day, well, as the match heads into its climax, England's batters face a really daunting chase. Huge pressure. Need to score quickly, but keep wickets intact. But with that momentum having decisively swung their way after the collapse, cricket fans are absolutely primed for a potentially thrilling finish. A real battle of wills. For you, the listener, it's just a perfect example of how a single day, even just a few overs, can completely flip a game on its head. Create that unforgettable sporting drama that gets everyone talking.
Wow, what a journey we've taken today. From the high-stakes world of global geopolitics, economic pressures affecting whole nations, to the intricate dance of domestic Indian politics shaped by deep demographic shifts and identity. Then shifting gears again to major health innovation that could transform millions of lives, and finally landing on the thrilling drama of the cricket pitch that's captivated a nation.
It really shows, doesn't it, how deeply interconnected global events are with what's happening domestically, and how every single headline, even if it seems small, holds layers of context, deep implications, fascinating connections. Knowledge is most valuable when it's truly understood, not just skimmed over. And we genuinely hope you found some of those aha moments today, seeing how these seemingly separate pieces actually fit together into a bigger picture.
Yeah, as we've seen today, headlines aren't just isolated incidents you read and forget. They're like threads in this incredibly complex tapestry, constantly evolving, influencing each other, building the larger story of our world. What will tomorrow's headlines tell us about these ongoing stories? What really stands out to you from today's deep dive? Anything that makes you want to explore further, understand more deeply, or maybe even rethink a perspective you had? Until next time, keep digging deeper.